would like to welcome you everyone to our next Didactic Friday. Today we're having a special guest, Joelyn Lima from EPFL Switzerland. And today we are going to talk about teaching transversal skills for engineering students. So very important topic, especially for us, since at least some of us are the teachers at the Gdansk Tech University. Okay, so Joelyn, the floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you for participating.
Thank you so much. And I really apologize up front. I am really usually not so technically challenged, but apparently today was one of the days that really tried us. Okay, so without wasting too much time, I would like to get into the talk. So today I will be talking to you about teaching transversal skills for engineering students. Now, many of the words in this title are probably familiar to you and some are not. Don't worry, we will go through all this. A little bit about me. I am Dr. Joelyn Lima. I am both a pedagogical advisor and a scientist at EPFL. And part of my job is improving the teaching and learning at EPFL. So this project is in line with this particular aim. Most of the work that I will be talking to you today is related to a project that we call the 3T Play project. I'll talk to you more about it as the talk unfolds. And this was a Lego Foundation funded project aimed at teaching transversal skills. Having said that, and used this word multiple times, I want to know what you think are transversal skills. So please type it into the chat. This is going to be an interactive talk, by the way, so that you will be doing a lot of writing and typing. So please, what do you think is the word transversal skill means? Presentation skills, yes, that is one type of a transversal skill, of course. I'm going to give you another 20 seconds or so to type it out. Yes, general skills of various in various elements of our life, set of social skills. All these are correct. All these are types of transversal skills. If you think about like broadly what they are skills that cut across different fields and disciplines. Thinking about disciplinary skills, those are related to specific work in a discipline. For example, a chemist will need to know what titration is and how to titer, but that's not really useful to a biologist. Whereas a biologist might need to know how to streak agar, but a physicist doesn't care about that. On the other hand, transversal skills are important not just across just fields and disciplines, but also educational, career, and professional stages. Now, different people use different words to define these set of skills. Some of the words that are used are soft skills. Now, we really don't like that because that makes it sound as if, oh, it's soft, which means it's easy, so I can just learn it. But not really. These are sometimes the really, really difficult skills, the really hard skills to learn. Another phrase that is often used is professional skills. However, that might make students think that they only need it when they become professionals, and that is not the case. They need it even when they are students. Another phrase that's often used is 21st century skills. But these skills were just as relevant in the 18th century as they will be in the 23rd. And so we like to use the word transversal. This is also a terminology that is mostly used in Europe. I understand that in America you use transferable skills, but either way, you know what I am talking about. Now, since this is developed in an engineering environment, I'll be talking a lot about engineering. However, these skills are just as important for any discipline. So whichever discipline you are coming from, these are probably relevant for you. Now, we know that engineers need transversal skills. Thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals that have been set by the UN, or thinking about the grand challenges that engineers have, we know that engineers will need these transversal skills in order to address and face these challenges. The fact that these are important is not under debate. Everybody recognizes it. Students know it, educators know it, researchers have written so many papers about it. Employers are constantly telling us we need you to teach these skills to your students, and policymakers have recognized this, and so these skills have been explicitly introduced into many documents that are used for accreditation. So ABET, CTI, whatever you use, they will have transversal skills listed in them. Having said that, in order to help our students develop transversal skills, we had this project that lasted for about 3 years, which was called the 3T Play project here at EPFL. The 3T's stand for teaching transversal skills, something that we've just spoken about, using tangibles to technical students. Technical students are engineering students. That's the environment all this was developed in. And tangibles, we'll get to that in a minute. So hold on to your horses for that. A lot of what I will be talking about today is going to be in our book, which was supposed to be released yesterday, but was not, and should be out soon. So at the end of the talk, I will give you a QR code. If you give me your information in the QR code, as soon as it is released, I will send you an email. It will be a free ebook that you will be able to download and use for your students. Now, we are going to do a brief pivot in this talk. For the next few minutes, about 30 minutes or so, we will actually be doing an adapted activity that is found in the book. Now, in the book, the activity is done with actual Lego and actual tangibles, so something that you can touch and feel with. But since we don't have that capability here, I have adapted it for this environment. And so the slides that you will see henceforth, you will see that the formatting is slightly different. That is to show you that we are in this pivot of part of the talk, and then we will pivot right back to the main talk later on. So we will now do a brief activity focusing on giving feedback on a product. This activity is about developing the feedback. We know that students learn more when they are actively engaged in the learning process. And these benefits can be amplified with effective strategies. And so this part of the workshop will help you develop your skills to give feedback that improves your students' learning. Thinking about active learning, we know from lots of literature and lots of meta-analyses that have been done that active learning increases student learning outcomes. In addition to that, it also can decrease achievement gaps. So that is, decrease gaps between the low achievers and the high achievers. However, these benefits only occur when students experience intense cognitive engagement. So if you are just asking like one question during your lecture, that's not really cognitive engagement. So the students really need to be working, have their brains working. And some pedagogical practices have been shown to have a higher than average effect on student learning, and we will focus on one such practice. So before we go into the nitty gritty of this particular workshop, I want you to think back to your scenario, your situation, your context. What are some tasks that your students commonly do where you need to give them feedback? So write this down somewhere. Please don't write, it doesn't have to be in the chat, but I want you to write it down somewhere. It could be on a piece of paper or something so that you have it up front for the rest of the talk. And I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. All right. So I gave my students a task as well. And my students had to build a Lego duck. They had to build a Lego duck with a maximum of 7 bricks. This was the instruction that was given to them. When I ask a student to perform a task, and then I need to give them feedback, it is really useful to have some objective criteria that both me and my student can use as benchmarks. They aim towards this, and I evaluate them based on this. This is completely transparent to everybody involved. You might recognize this as being part of a rubric that many of you probably use in your studies anyway. So this was the rubric that I gave my students when I asked them to build a duck. And now we are going to use this rubric to give them structured feedback. So you might want to take a screenshot of this slide just in case you need it for later. Okay, so this is a duck that my student built. This is student A. This was the duck they built. So when I'm thinking now of giving them feedback on this particular duck, I will first clarify what an excellent performance looks like. Now, students often don't deliver because they don't know what is required. Even though they've been told, you probably said it 5 different times. It was probably written on the top of their course management software, and it was probably written at the bottom of their exam sheet. Maybe you've done this 5 times. Doesn't matter. When you are giving them feedback, remind them again. Bring them into that mindset again. So when you're starting with feedback, your goal is to respond to a student's feedback work by clarifying what an excellent performance looks like. So I will start something by saying the goal of this activity was, or the criteria for this assignment are, blah, blah, blah. So in my case, I would say it is important to deliver a product that matches the assignment. Here, you were told to use 7 bricks to build the duck. And then you tell them how their work actually meets the criteria. Think about some of the positives and the negatives. So I would follow that sentence with, your duck is immediately identifiable as a duck, but you used 8 pieces. And so now the task here is to clarify what the criteria are and how well do they meet that criteria. So now I have already given student A feedback. I want you to practice giving feedback to my students and give student B the feedback. You can choose any of the criteria here, clarify the criteria, and then tell my students how well they met the criteria. It would be nice if you type this out into a different document, but even if you're directly typing into the chat, type it, but don't hit enter till I tell you to hit enter. So please take the next 30 seconds or so to give my student feedback by clarifying what the criteria is and telling them how they met the criteria. You can use any of these 3 criteria mentioned in this rubric. So type it out. You can paste it into the chat, but don't hit enter. All right, in about 15 seconds, I'm going to tell you to hit enter. So if you've typed it out elsewhere, you might want to paste it into the chat now. All right, type it in. You can hit enter. I can see some typing, but I can't see any entering. Okay, so maybe one of the things that we could have told this student is they have clearly used less than 7 bricks, so that's okay. But maybe we could have told them that the criteria was to use pay attention to overall appearance. And while you have certain features that do make it look like a duck, there are often certain elements like body parts that are associated with ducks that are currently missing. So that would be a feedback that you gave this particular student. Moving on, it is then important to help a student to develop their skills, not just to solve this problem, but to solve similar problems like this in the future. Because you don't want them to come back to you again and again and again and ask you the same type of question. And so the point is to avoid task-focused or person-focused feedback and prioritize process-focused feedback. So again, we're talking about my student A and the duck that they have built. And I want to give them feedback on how they are approaching the problem, not just how they have worked on this one problem. And so if I tell them you have used more than 7 bricks, that is not very useful feedback next time when they might have to build an elephant, which might require them to build it with 30 bricks. And if they're only thinking about 7 bricks, that's not going to be very useful. If I then rather give them process level feedback, that would mean feedback that is applicable in tasks like this. Maybe next time they have to build a representation of a tree. Maybe next time they don't have to use Lego, they have to use something else. And so I can ask them something like, how do you check to make sure that you have met the criteria? And that is what is the second level, which is giving them process level feedback. So first, I will identify the criteria and tell them how their duck met the criteria, and then I will give them some process level feedback. So going back to this student, you've identified the criteria and how well the duck met that particular criteria. So now this might be a little difficult, but it's important to then think about what is the process they went through and having them think about the process. So how could you give them process level feedback? Type it out into the chat. Okay. So maybe if you were giving them feedback on that attention to overall appearance, you could have said what you've typed there. That is lovely. So what do you think would change if you used a different number of bricks or something like that, thinking of what process they have followed. And finally, the last thing to think about while giving them feedback is to make sure that the student knows that this is not an isolated problem. You will have similar problems later on. It's not, if you have asked to calculate the volume of a bucket and next time we've asked you to calculate the volume of a building, it's the same thing. It's not two different concepts. And so having them make that transfer is really important because it is not something that is easy for them. And so one of the ways you can do is by just adding a tagline which says, in situations like this, how would you do XYZ? Which is something that reminds a student that this is not the only circumstance that this happens in. So you've been doing a lot of feedback to my students. Now I would like you to work on giving feedback to your own students. So go back to that task that you had thought of, where you had, which you had written down at the beginning of this activity, because your students will probably never build Lego bricks. but they will engage in tasks where you have to give them feedback. So going back to that task, I want you to think about what is that structured feedback you can give your students. And at this point, I want us to go into breakout rooms. And in those breakout rooms, please discuss the task and how you would give them this very structured feedback. Again, you might want to take a screenshot of this page because I don't know if you can see that in your breakout rooms as well. So please take a screenshot and then we will get back here. You will have 3 minutes. So whoever is setting up the rooms, can you please set them up now? We can have maybe 2 people in a room because we have few of us, and set the rooms up for 3 minutes each. All right. Sorry. Yeah. All right. So now that you have thought about how to give practice feedback to your students, we are going to take a few minutes and think about, reflect on the activity that we did. What part of giving feedback was most difficult for you? How can you improve your skills? And then how can you assess your ability to respond to provide useful feedback? You do not have to share this with anyone. You can just think about it or write it down somewhere where you can see it for your own reference, but this is not something you have to write down in the chat or share with anybody. So take a moment to just reflect and see what you will be walking away with from this activity. All right. So now we are going to do a big pivot back to the main part of the talk. So this was an example of an activity that is in our book, which has been developed using what we call the 3T approach to teaching transversal skills. In this approach, we focus explicitly on the skill development and not the product. Those Lego ducks are going to be dismantled immediately after this, and so you don't really care about that. What you do care about is developing your ability to give feedback. These are mini experiential learning activities which allow you to do them many times iteratively and have really short feedback loops. So you do it, you get feedback, you do it again, you get feedback, you do it again, you get feedback. So they're small, they're iterative. And because you are focusing just on 1 or 2 skills at a time, the cognitive load is very low. Additionally, this is done in such a, because the product is not important, they are really low stakes. And so you can afford to fail forward. It does not count towards your final grade. However, they are set at a level of difficulty that encourages perseverance, that they're not boring or they're not too easy. And finally, there is an explicit opportunity for you to reflect and see, what am I walking out of the door with? What am I taking away? What can I use in a circumstance the next time I have to use this skill? All these activities that we have developed, including the one that I just spoke to you about, have been developed based on the 3T play Trident framework. Now, the Trident framework has 3 moments. One of the moments is experiencing, wherein the students actually apply the concepts and tools in an experiential learning. So it is not an academic debate, it is actually doing, actually learning, actually experiencing. When you think about when students usually get to experience transversal skills in normal engineering education, it's usually during these project-based courses. You know, these semester-based courses where they have to do projects, they're working in teams, they have a product at the end. At this time, however, students' cognitive load is very high because their grade matters and they have to do so many different things at one time. They have to do feedback to each other, but they also have to do budgeting and they also have to do time management and they have to do project planning. So there are so many things coming at one time. And finally, there there is this big looming grade at the end. So the product is really important. And then there is not much time or energy to invest in the process. Additionally, because many of these activities take a whole semester, there are a lot of resources that go into each iteration, and you don't really have time to reiterate it based on feedback that you have got. This is the exact opposite in the 3T approach, where, as I told you, they are short, cognitive load is low, the focus is entirely on the process, and there is time for multiple iterations. And because they are really short iterations, the amount of resources you need is very low to start with. The second, another moment that we have in the Trident is learning from experience. Stepping back and reflecting about the activity helps students to transfer their skills. University curricula, though, rarely encourages this transfer between skills. By the time they get feedback, they're already halfway into their second semester, and then there is really no time to apply that feedback, and they don't really tend to think about it. And engineering students typically require explicit reflection prompts. The third moment in the framework is knowing, where you share the knowledge and concepts that define the targeted skills, where you tell them explicitly what the skill is about, what strategies to use, how to use those strategies for that particular skill. And this is important because students need instruction on the strategies and methods and not just have opportunities to practice those skills. So put together, this is what the Trident framework looks like. This is a graphical display of it, where you have these three different moments. They don't have to occur in this order. They can occur in different orders. They don't all have to take the same amount of time, but they all need to be there. They can occur at any point for any amount of time, but the fact is that they're all interlinked to each other. Your moment of knowing, your moment of experiencing, and your moments of learning from the experience that students have taken. So if we take a brief look at the activity that we just did on giving feedback and thinking about where these three moments were present, because all three moments were there in that activity. So can you think about a time where I told you some of the strategies and the concepts in how to give feedback? Did that happen? And when did that happen? Feel free to unmute yourselves and talk, because we don't have to use chat now.
Yeah, so it was generally at the beginning, because
Yes.
if we want our students to think outside of the box, we want them to know what is inside the box. So we have to start with some knowledge and
yes. So
to proceed with those iterations.
Exactly. So when I was doing this, I told you exactly why we do active learning. There was that piece of knowledge about why this is important. And then there was very structured about this is how you're going to give the first part of the feedback. This is how you're going to give the second part of the feedback. So there was these explicit pieces of knowledge. Thinking then about the second one, where we think about experiencing. Where did you get a chance to actually experience the feedback?
Yeah, of course, that was just the second step. We were told or asked to talk about or think about how we would give the feedback regarding that what you said and try to apply that.
Exactly. Thank you. And then the third moment, where learning from the experience. Where did you get a chance to step back and reflect on the activity?
I identified even 2 points for that, because I was thinking about my own research or my own students, which I was thinking about preparing the reports or the analysis which they are taking, and how am I evaluating then? And afterwards, when I wrote it down, you gave some time to actually think about it and what was difficult. What should I know more? Actually, I have some questions, but we can skip those questions at the end. Yeah.
Yes, fantastic. So this is how a typical 3T play activity is structured. And you are right by saying that there might be multiple moments of learning from reflection, or there might be multiple moments of knowledge, which is perfectly fine. They all don't have to occur in the same amount, in the same order, or in the same for the same amount of time. So why then should we go through the trouble of doing it this way? Why structure learning for transversal skills in this way? This is not what we've been doing, so why bother? And so I'd like to tell you about some lessons that we've learned from work done at EPFL, both through the 3T Play project, but also our colleagues at EPFL also. A few years ago, we asked the alumni of our institution about, hey, how good a job did we do, educating you? What did we do well and what did we not do so well? And basically, our alumni told us, you did a really good job in teaching me the disciplinary and the technical skills, but not really that good a job in teaching us the transversal skills. And so the giving feedback, collaborating and communicating, this was actually really missing from the curriculum. And this is not unique to EPFL. Multiple institutions have done these studies. We've done studies with them, and they've said that graduating students are just not work ready yet. They are not satisfied with their proficiency in the skills, and then they need to do a lot of upskilling and filling in these professional gaps when they go in so that they can be successful in their professional careers. Keeping this in mind, EPFL has a lot of work integrating transversal skills into the curriculum that is planned and the curriculum that is actually taught. So there is, if you look at any of the course documents for at our institution, you will see that transversal skills are explicitly listed there. And there is a Center for Transversal Skills and Career, which then also provides support for teachers and students in order to develop these transversal skills. We wanted to, however, know, do students actually see these? Are they also present in the curriculum that is experienced by the students? Because this can be very different from the curriculum that is planned or curriculum that is taught. And this is important because students' conceptions of what they are learning can actually influence what they're learning. So if they don't think that they're learning something, they just don't end up learning that. And so we asked our students, which skills do you want to learn? And, do you think the institution needs to provide you with additional support to develop? And what pedagogical aspects do you see as being present in your current curriculum? The data for this particular study came from bachelor and master's students from multiple engineering programs. These were all student assistants who were taking a training with me, which was really useful because I had this really diverse sampling from across the institution, study programs, years, gender, all that. And however, these students also had enough pedagogical knowledge to distinguish between feedback and assessment. And so we asked them, what do you prioritize? And the skills that they said they prioritized, they also said that they had the least amount of support developing. This was a bit worrying for us because the skills that they perceived as lacking were the skills that were most commonly cited in our course documents. So our teachers have been writing them down, probably doing something in class to teach them, but the students are just not seeing it. We also asked the students, do you receive information or training? Thinking back to that first moment, the trident, which is knowing. So do you get the information or training about these skills? Thinking about the second moment in the training, which is experiencing, we ask them, do you get feedback from your assistants or teachers? So in order to get feedback, they would have had to experience it. And finally, we ask them, is this skill assessed as part of your grade? So for it to be assessed, they've hopefully transferred it into another situation, and that was a proxy that we used over here. We were not very happy with the results that we saw. Students perceived very low integration of transversal skills in their curricula. They were saying that this was in a couple or fewer of their courses. This, let me remind you, is a sampling across the institution. And so this is quite disheartening. We did another study where we asked engineering teachers on what are your perspectives of teaching transversal skills. And a similar study was also done in Norway in the Norwegian Military Academy. And what engineering teachers are telling us is these skills are important, but students will learn them along the way. It's fine. And teachers have a really low awareness of conditions that support the development of these skills. And they don't really know much about pedagogical activities that directly support these transversal skill development. However, literature has shown us time and time again that transversal skill development requires scaffolding. They are not developed by just putting students in situations that require them. Think of it this way. You can throw a child in the river and expect them to swim, and some of them will swim, but maybe some of them will drown. And so just throwing a student into a situation where they have to be in a team and not giving them any strategies or giving them any abilities to work in the team is akin to that. It's not that they won't learn teamwork, they will, but it will be very inefficient. And at the end of the process, there might be a lot of unlearning that they need to do. And therefore, transversal skill development should be explicitly addressed and scaffolded, and students need instructions on the strategies and the methods that underpin these transversal skills. And one way in which to do this explicit scaffolding is by using the Trident framework to develop these activities that you will be teaching your students in order to see that they have the knowledge and skills that they need in order to then experience the skill. And then there is that moment for them to say, step back and say, okay, what am I going to do next time? This time I have built a robot, but what are the skills I really learned here that I can then use next time when I'm building a car? All this is going to be in our book, as I was mentioning to you earlier. The book has 8 chapters. The first chapter is more of an overview, which tells you what are transversal skills, why these are important, how do they need to be explicitly taught in engineering programs, and then goes into a bit about the 3T play approach to teaching transversal skills, which looks at current pedagogical approaches and then contrasts them with the 3T framework and the 3T approach. Talks a little bit about tangibles and why to use tangibles and how the framework was developed. It also specifically talks about assessing the impact of these interventions that teach transversal skills and includes a model questionnaire. And finally, there is a section to help you use this handbook to improve how you teach transversal skills, which includes choosing which skills are relevant for your students and then facilitating these experiential learning activities, which are really different than the normal didactics our teachers are usually used to. The next 6 chapters address specific transversal skills themselves. The first one this is about developing skills that improve collaboration. This also looks at the free rider effect. Chapter 3 looks at how to support students to give constructive feedback, and especially looks at the emotional aspect of giving feedback, because feedback often students know what to tell you each other, but they don't do it because they're afraid of hurting each other, or they're afraid of these uncomfortable feelings that may develop, and they just don't want to deal with it. So chapter 3 explicitly focuses on this emotional aspect. Chapter 4 is supporting students to develop skills that promote sustainability. Sustainability in itself is not a skill, but there are many skills that support sustainability, including perspective taking, systems thinking, and negotiation. Chapter 5, you did a real adapted version of Chapter 5 today, is how to support students in coaching and peer teaching. Chapter 6 is supporting students in planning and risk management, and Chapter 7 is about psychological safety. Each of these chapters is structured the same way. You will first have an activity description and the outcomes, so you know what your students are supposed to be able to do. And then you have a very detailed activity outline. Each of the colors in these bubbles here represents the 3 different moments. The size of the bubbles will tell you approximately how much time you need to take. They also tell you, if you look at the top of the graphic, it will tell you whether you have to do them in a large group, a small group, individually, how you do them, how much time they're supposed to take, and which slides or which handouts you will need. Each chapter also has questions and answers. conceptual and practical underpinnings. So we've done a really deep dive into the literature, done the literature review for you. So if you just read through this will be sufficient enough backing for you to go and teach these. And each chapter has all the slides and handouts that you will need to teach this. So you can just download it, take it to your class. It is ready to go. As I said, we have developed these activities for six different skills. However, we recognize that there are more than 6 skills in the world, and you probably are interested in others. And so in order to help you develop activities for yourself, we have chapter 8, which will use the Trident framework to design activities to develop transversal skills using the backward design methodology. And this is a really detailed worksheet that the teachers can go through themselves and iteratively develop activities that support them best. The chapter also has some advice on how do you then pilot this activity and what type of feedback you might need to get in order to do pilot testing of this activity before you actually teach it. So that was what I had to share with you today. This is the book that is coming out soon. So if you scan the QR code and type in your email ID, as soon as the free ebook is released, I will send you an email saying, hey, you can download it now. And I am happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you for indulging me. In the words of my people, Teo Borenkuru.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much, Joelyn. If someone would like to ask some question, you can type those questions on a chat, and I take the privilege to ask them. Nevertheless, I have a few questions.
Yes, of course.
You showed the slide where you showed that some students were talking about those transversal skills which were not learned. Would you be so kind and share this slide again? As a matter of fact, you showed those 2 points, for example, about the communication.
This one.
Oh, yeah, this one. Is that really that big of a problem? Is that this great issue with the communication skills throughout the engineering studies students?
Yes. So basically what we figured out is that the students have to do communication, but we don't really tell them how to do it. We don't really give them the skills and strategies of, okay, this is good, this is not good. And this is something that they see lacking. They don't see enough support in order to develop these skills.
Okay, but this is 100% almost.
No, this is frequency.
Okay.
This is not percentage. This is N.
Okay.
So 100
Okay.
students.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, the N for this was about 240
250,
students.
40? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
so out of 240
less than
students, 100
50%.
students. Yes.
Okay. I was afraid that this is that bad.
No,
Okay,
no.
not
But
that
I
bad.
mean,
Okay.
still, this is quite a lot.
Yes, that's important issue. I think we
Yes.
should
We were
talk about it.
We were actually also encouraged when we saw this because we saw things like sustainability and ethics on this list, something that we had not seen before. And so students are saying, no, but this is important to me, and you need to teach me how to be more sustainable and how to be more ethical. And this is an important part of being an engineer. And so while we were worried about the rest, even just seeing that students are prioritizing some of these skills really made us feel happy.
Okay, okay. And another question regarding the graph, are those colors random or?
No, they're not. They're not random. This was developed, mapped onto the CDIO framework. So multiple engineering universities here use the CDIO framework, and the colors are mapped onto the different sections
Okay.
of CDIO.
Okay, understand. What about I think 3 or 2 slides earlier, you also showed some things regarding the student mentioned about teamwork, I remember.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's it. So those things, students think that they are missing in curriculum.
This is alumni. These are people who have already passed out of the institution, and they were like, this is what we thought was missing. You could have done a better job of teaching us this so that we could have been better prepared for our jobs.
Okay, so this is their view, despite the fact some of those things are given throughout the studies. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, these are again students' perceptions and alumni perceptions. And
Okay.
so this is part of the thing that it might be part of the curriculum that is planned, it might be part of the curriculum that is taught, but it is not somehow part of the curriculum that is experienced by the students. And so explicitly scaffolding it in these, using the Trident framework and explicitly giving them those moments to say, okay, well, we did it right now in our
Mhm.
classroom here, but when you go into the real life, how will you take this with you? So giving that explicit moment of learning from their experience might help increase the perceptions in their experienced curriculum.
Okay. Another question is that I was just at the beginning of your speech, I was noting the question, which transversal skill is probably most important in your opinion? And regarding that, what you saw, I would say for myself that communication, maybe managing the team. What is your opinion on that?
So this is a really important question. And what is important for me might be different than what is important for your students. And so a teacher wanting to teach transversal skills might want to ask their students what is important to them, or might want to think about what are the jobs my student is going to do after they pass out, after they leave the institution, what skills are they going to need there, and those are the skills that will be most important to them. And so some of the career paths that the students in teacher A's classroom take might be different from the career paths in teacher B's classroom. And so therefore thinking explicitly about what my student needs might be really useful, instead of like having this general thing about, okay, everybody needs X skills.
Okay, okay, you are right, because from my perspective, I'm quite often talking about it with my students. I'm always telling them that in my imagination, you should be the managers of those, because I'm a chemist, yeah, the
Yeah.
managers of the laboratories and the head staff and stuff and so on. Uh, but as you mentioned, and as I saw on your slides, they are mentioning they feel they are lacking the ability to manage the team. So
Yes.
probably that's another thing, not only the communication, that there are
Yes.
many different aspects which should be cared about.
Yes. And so taking your example as well, telling them that they should be able to do manage a team is very different than giving them the ability to manage a team and like, here, manage this team, but also here are some of the things that you will need, some of the strategies that you'll need to think about while managing the team. I'm giving them to you beforehand. Now use these strategies to manage your team, and then at the end of it think about, okay, how do those strategies work, what didn't work. So like actually, instead of giving them, a very or overview or a broad experience, like putting them in that situation where they need to actually experience that skill of managing the team.
Okay, and plus inform them that
Yes.
now we are practicing those skills. Okay, this is quite important thought for me, because I was doing so and I was
Yes.
hoping.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my
Yes.
bad. Yeah, I was hoping that they are
Yes.
learning some new skills, but if I don't tell them explicitly, listen, guys, now we are training this thing,
Yes.
disregarding the chemistry around. Yeah, we are
Yes.
doing that particular thing. Think about it and try to. Okay, okay.
Brilliant. And so you're not alone. Or most teachers do that. They tell you, they're like, but my students got to work in the project. And I'm like, yes, but did you like tell them that? And also, did you like give them, so if they're managing a team, what might they need? They might need some documents, they might need some lists, they might need some checklists, give that to them beforehand. They're like, here, use this in order to manage your team. Like, here are some tools, here are some heuristics. In chemistry, when we are managing teams, we're also thinking about like, not just what the team tasks are, but maybe we are also thinking about like keeping a track of what reagents and everything we have. Here
Mhm.
is a list, here is what you might need to do. So giving them that knowledge, that sometimes what we think is implicit, but making it explicit to them.
Okay. Just to mention, if someone would like to ask questions, even in Polish, I can retranslate it to English quite quickly. So yeah, please be encouraged. But I have another question.
Yes,
You
please.
mentioned about the cognitive engagement. And
Yes.
we were talking about that during different Didactic Fridays. What do you think? How long, how much time can we push our students to be so cognitively active? Because there are many publications and many debates regarding that this, let's say, lifespan of this cognitive engagement is getting shorter and shorter. What are your feelings regarding that?
So from the work that I have done and from reading the literature, I am of like this is what we say. It's students learn when their brains are active. They don't learn when their hands are active. So just having them write something or just having them passively listen to you, they're not really doing much of the work. And so flipping the burden back on them and making them work all the time, making them work cognitively is important for their learning. However, just like any other physical effort, uh, cognitive effort also requires energy, requires it requires a lot of input into it. And so you're not going to be running the marathon the whole day, you're not going to be lifting weights the whole day, and so your entire course can't just be them working and working and working and working. They need, the brain also needs some time to just like, okay, relax and reflect and like, do its internal processing. So there should be this happy balance between getting them to do the work, but then also having them engage in other tasks or do something else which is not really cognitively heavy.
Okay, okay. What about the exact spans when we should tell our students, okay, now give yourself a few moments to relax, like 15 minutes, 10 minutes, it depends.
Yeah, I don't
Probably.
know.
Okay,
That is not something like the exact times is not something I've looked into.
okay,
But I would
understand.
say that they do need some brain rest, like their brains, or I mean, it's just like, think about it, it's just like physical activity. You're building your muscles. You're not going to be working those muscles the whole time. You will take some rest, but you will also can get back to it. So using
Yeah.
that same analogy.
And as you mentioned, our brain is like, I don't know, maybe 2% of the mass of our whole body. Nevertheless, it consumes around 20% of our oxygen. So this is the tremendous amount of energy that we need to support our brain. That's why probably we need some time, like to, to make our brain free of thinking about
Yeah.
different difficult things. And another thing you
I encourage
mentioned,
my students to like, go take a walk. Like, just don't be thinking about this. Go do something else. Also, like just Netflix and vegetate. It's fine for, it's okay to just like turn your brain off for a minute to allow your brain to form those neural connections that it is forming, and just to think for itself sometimes.
yeah, it's okay for the process, as you mentioned.
Yes.
And one more
Yes.
thing, you mentioned also about writing. I think it's quite important to add one important hint around that, because I think we were talking about the situation when the students are rewriting something. It doesn't give you anything.
No.
Nevertheless, if you mention that, guys, now we are having this small task, I'm letting you write something. You have to think about something that you are creating and you are writing your own thoughts. That's activity. That's
Yes.
engagement. We should
Yes.
discern those two things.
Yes, for sure. And one of the methods that I usually use with my students while teaching them how to do this is something called the Cornell method of taking notes, where the page is divided into three. This is widely available on the internet, so you can look at it. It was proposed by Cornell University in New York, where it is very, very cognitively engaged.
We have a small comment. Hopefully, students won't only understand that they should watch Netflix. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course,
so
we are talking about
the
the iterations.
Yeah, so the thing about our students is that they are really driven, they are really engaged, they are really working all the time. And so giving their brain some break is also important. And giving them a break without feeling guilty or without feeling that they are not that they are being unproductive. Knowing that that break is also just productive time for their brain.
Okay, perfect. Can I have a few moments of your time to ask specific questions about the task that we were doing
Yes, of course.
earlier? Yeah, okay. So
Yes, of course.
I was thinking about my students, and the fact that I'm giving them feedback after the laboratories, I'm always telling them that they will send me the report and I will read all of those and I will give you some small hints. And I'm generally in those reports, maybe I'm doing a wrong thing. Yeah. Now I'm understanding that. I'm reading the whole report. I'm checking which parts are wrong or might be better. And I'm showing this part might look like this. You forgot about doing this and this. This part might influence another part. So probably you should blah, 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 blah. So the perfect thing, should I start with, that's a question, should I start with telling them the perfect report should contain this and this and this and this, and then afterwards I should give those small feedbacks regarding a specific things?
So how exactly it would look like would be different in your scenario. But let me
Mhm.
tell you about what I do in mine, where I have a
Okay.
doctoral course where at the end of it, they have to submit a report, and that's what they're getting graded on. There is a template that they need to follow for their report because I am not reading 15 pages, I'm reading 8 pages maximum. And so there is a defined template for them. When I'm giving them the template, I also give them the rubric. I'm like, this is the rubric I will be using to judge your report, to evaluate your report. Write your report based on this. This is what I want if you want a perfect grade. These are the things that absolutely need to be there. And the rubric has like what is an excellent performance, what is a developing performance, and what is an unacceptable performance. And so they can take that rubric and look at their report and say, did I meet these criteria? If they did, they should be able to tell me what grades they're getting. And so at the end of it, therefore, my feedback is very broad and overview rather than nitty gritty because the rubric has already been given to them at the beginning. This also allows me to go much faster through my grading because they already know the broad level things. And so I usually take one printout of a rubric per student, and then I just highlight things and I'm like, okay, this is what you've done. And the different highlighter, I'm like, this is what is not done. And then just staple that and give it to them. And so my work goes much faster.
Okay, okay. I have a question. Probably you noticed when you implemented those rubric thing, um, is it right that some marks were going higher throughout the students who were informed about what is the task? Are there, what I mean is, are there rubrics which are given to the students are improving the marks? Is the mean of
Um,
the grades higher then?
Right. So we started the course with rubrics itself, and so I cannot tell you whether
Okay,
they are higher or lower. But in general, the students score really well because they are told explicitly, this is what I
okay.
expect you to do. They give me what I expect them to do, and then there is no reason for me to deduct any points.
Okay, I understand. I'm just wondering how the grades are, um, how the rubrics are influencing the grades, and how is the connection between the grades in this particular case and the retention of the knowledge, forming the information in our brain. This is a tricky question. Probably we won't have the answer for that question here today, but that's a thing that interests me, really bothers me.
Yes, I think that is a big debate worldwide also. Like, what is like the grade versus what you actually retain. If I remember from my schooling, I would score really high on many of the exams because I knew how to answer the exams. But now, if you ask me anything from there, and I'd be like, no clue, dude, I forgot it the day after the exam.
Okay, okay. Probably the phenomenon of stock learning when we are trying to learn everything the night
Yes,
before the exam. It's probably
yes,
the influencing the event.
yeah.
Okay. So my questions are already depleted and I cannot see any additional questions on the chat. So the last comment that I would like to give you, it's a shame that you don't have this book because it's Black Friday and we probably would love to make a discount. Nevertheless, you mentioned that this book is free. So
Yes.
let's treat it like a Black Friday. Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay.
We were
Okay.
hoping it would be Thanksgiving because that was yesterday and we celebrate Thanksgiving. And so we were hoping it would be like something to be thankful for, but it didn't come out in time. But yes, if you send me, you have my contact information. Again, let me go back to that slide. So that's my contact information right there. And feel free to just get in touch with me and let me know if you like a copy of the ebook, or use that link and sign up there. And as soon as it's done, we will send it to you.
Okay, so just for the viewers who will check on this debate, this Didactic Friday afterwards, probably this book might be available for you now, so you can contact Joelyn and use the knowledge.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, of course. Please feel free. I'd be happy to hear from you.
We are happy that you took the invitation, and thank you for the great speech. And I hope to see you somewhere in the future. That would be great.
That would be really lovely. Thank you again so much for having me.
Thank you, Joelyn. Thank you, and see you. Oh, and we are having one additional comment here. The book is for free, so because of Black Friday, we should get some money for downloading the book. Yeah.
Yeah, this is unfortunately not how I'm making my millions. So, yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, and see you
Yes.
afterwards. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
See ya.
much, and see you
Bye.
again.